The International Court of Justice will this afternoon hand down its ruling in South Africa's latest application for more provisional measures against Israel for its actions in Gaza. Last week, South Africa's legal team argued that Israel is guilty of genocide for the way in which it has killed Palestinians in Gaza. For more on this, let's now speak to Kaajal Ramjathan, Keogh, who is the director of the Africa program at the International Commission of Jurists. Kaajal, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. Listening into the arguments that were made last week, do you think that South Africa has made out a solid case?
Good morning, Aldrin. I do think South Africa has made out a very solid case. It just depends on how the court decides to rule in this particular instance. We have been in this exact situation before, where the South African legal team have asked for provisional measures, additional provisional measures, and amendment of the provisional measures, and the court has declined to grant them. So we're in an uncertain position today about which way the court will go. We are hopeful that the court will grant these provisional measures in light of that emergency and urgent situation which the South African team has outlined that is happening in Rafah at the moment. The urgent and humanitarian needs of the huge numbers of people in Rafah do deserve particular consideration from the court, and we are hopeful that the court will at least, at the minimum, grant a ceasefire in the Rafah region of Gaza.
Yeah. So with that said as well, this was the fourth time that South Africa was before the ICJ. And remember that in March as well, when they asked for those emergency measures, they were warning at the time that Israel has made these threats that they will go into Rafah. And they didn't get some of the measures that they were asking for. And Israel did go into Rafah. Does the court ever then sit back and say that based on a previous decision that we have taken and not heeding the calls and considering the risks that are involved, perhaps now we need to take the type of measures as our DG of International Relations had said, must be clear and direct?
I mean, I think it's very clear to anybody who's watching the situation in Rafah unfold that very urgent, immediate measures need to be taken. But what we've seen so far is that the court has been very cautious. So it really is uncertain. We saw a softening of the court at South Africa's third request to them, where several judges thought that they should have ordered a ceasefire. We're hoping that at this point, they've had further discussions. They've seen what has happened. At the end of the hearing at the end of the 2 days of hearing last week, the court posed a few questions to Israel and the Israel team, and we've yet to see how that team has responded. During the hearings, the Israel team has failed to provide sufficient evidence and legal argument to counter what the South Africans produced before the court. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the court rules, and in particular, whether it grants a ceasefire in Rafah.
Yeah, and if we look at the arguments, for instance, before the court, what Israel has argued as well is that South Africa is abusing the processes of the ICJ, also that South Africa hasn't made out a case of genocide. The lawyer representing Israel going as far as saying that repeating a lie of genocide doesn't make it true. Yes, there is a tragedy that is unfolding in Gaza, but you can't equate that to a genocide.
Israel's main strategy has been to attack South Africa and to attack South Africa's argument and to attack the evidence which they've produced in court. They've not provided any real evidence to show that there's no conflict or that there's no genocidal intent. Senior political leaders in Israel have made various comments along the way about the need to kill Israelis, to kill Israeli children, to remove Israelis from the territory of Gaza. So there is a huge body of evidence which has been clearly documented, which does display what Israel is saying is not happening. So I think the court does need to take all of this into consideration when it arrives at its decision, and we will see precisely what it orders this afternoon.
Yeah, one of the other measures that South Africa is asking for that we haven't really emphasized much on is that they are requesting that there should be provisions when it comes to the assistance, the humanitarian aid and assistance to a population of Gaza, as well as fact-finding missions, internationally mandated bodies, officials, investigations and journalists in order to assess and record conditions on the ground. So they should be allowed to do their work, including the investigators, including the journalists, which then speaks to they have been prevented from doing that specific work. The ICC is a chief prosecutor this week also revealing that Israel has essentially barred them from entering Gaza.
Absolutely. So South Africa is making very reasonable requests in the circumstances. They're asking for access to the territory. They're asking for international monitoring groups to come in to document what is happening on the territory. They're asking for aid, and they've asked for this numerous times since the beginning, for humanitarian aid and assistance to be facilitated access into the territory. This has been problematic since the start. It would be very important for international groups to be able to get access to Gaza and to Rafah, to be able to document and produce evidence which can be used before the court on the situation on the ground. In addition, news outlets such as Al Jazeera have been banned in Gaza. So it's very difficult to get an accurate account of what is happening, except from people on the ground and except for what Israel is explaining to us is happening. So the importance of that direct access to the territory and independent monitoring and report writing of what is happening is hugely important, and we hope that the court will grant that request.
Israeli government spokesperson is quoted as saying, and we played the clip a bit earlier on as well, no power on earth will stop Israel from protecting its citizens and going after Hamas in Gaza. So to what end, once again, will any provisional measures ordered by the court be acceded to by Israel?
And that is the difficulty of working with the International Court of Justice. It does not have an enforcement mechanism. Even if the court orders these things which have been requested by South Africa, there's no guarantee that it will be implemented. The only thing which can be done is for international independent monitors to be allowed into the territory to document whether or not Israel is adhering to any requests and orders made by the court.
Yeah. Finally, also looking at the number of countries, especially European countries, that have come out to say that they will recognize the sovereignty as well as the statehood of Palestine. What does this mean? Because outside of, for instance, a court judgment or even an ICC court judgment, political power is still at play. Political influence is very important, and that political influence coming from some of Israel's allies.
This situation is not going to be resolved by a court. The situation is only going to be resolved with a political solution is the only way to arrive at a resolution of the conflict which is happening between Israel and Palestine. In the context, it's very important for Palestine to be recognized as a state so that it has equal bargaining power at a global platform and before the United Nations. So that recognition of Palestine by other countries is hugely important, and we hope that more countries will follow suit.
Well, unless if, of course, the United States rejects that application at the United Nations Security Council. But thank you so much for your time. That was Kaajal Ramjathan, Keogh, who is from the International Commission of Jurists.